A Botanical Daughter by Noah Medlock is my new obsession. I think most bookworms, myself included, have that handful of books that we just talk about almost incessantly. We will bring these books up at any opportunity. Frankenstein is obviously the big one for me, and you'll see why this is my new one. I know in my bones I'm going to be talking about this book a lot from now on in the future. I will be bringing it up at any opportunity. A Botanical Daughter is a queer, Victorian, Gothic horror novel. Those are four things that I love from the very bottom of my heart. Queer fiction, Victorian fiction, Gothic fiction, and horror fiction are my bread and butter, and this is all of them. And this is a book that is shamelessly and intensely inspired by Frankenstein. I couldn't really ask for more. In terms of aligning with my personal tastes, this novel is perfect. But what's it about? A Botanical Daughter is set in the late Victorian period, in the county of Buckinghamshire, just outside of London. Our protagonists are two men, Gregor, a botanist, and Simon, a taxidermist. And very unusually and unconventionally, these two men live and work together in a botanical garden on a hill. I say they work together, they actually just work under one roof, the same roof that they live under. Simon actually spends all of his time in the basement doing taxidermy, while Gregor does botany out in the light under the glass ceiling. It is not explicitly said at first that they are gay, until it is. In order to do his work as a taxidermist, Simon has to have fresh animal carcasses, and so he periodically, like once a week, wanders into the local village where a retired poacher brings him things he's killed for a small fee. Pheasants, squirrels, and other forest creatures. But this poacher also happens to have a daughter. This daughter is in her late teens, and her dad really wants her to just go off somewhere, get a job, do something useful. And so early in the book, he asks Simon, can she come and work at your botanical garden as a kind of housekeeper? I know you live there, I know you also work there, you're busy, why don't you let her keep the place nice and clean and tidy? Please, she needs something to do. And so Simon reluctantly accepts, oh great, okay, let's bring this girl in and have her clean for us or whatever. But the sad thing about this girl, Jennifer, is that she recently lost her friend. She had a very, very close best friend in the village called Connie, or Constance. And Connie just recently died. General consensus by everyone who knew her, including her own father, is that Connie took her own life. But Jennifer isn't sure that that's true. Whatever the case, Connie's gone and Jenny needs something to do. So off she goes to work for Simon and Gregor in their botanical garden. Now, almost immediately in the novel, Gregor is sent something. As I said, he works as a botanist, and he's gotten his hands on a really strange mycelium, which has been shipped to him all the way from Indonesia. When he opens up the crate, he finds inside a network of mushrooms and vines, things that physically move and contort. This thing is alive and intelligent, maybe. And at the center of the crate is a flower that has bloomed, and the mycelium is keeping it alive, is sustaining it, looking after it. Gregor has never seen anything like this. And he's also a shamelessly arrogant man, and so he names it after himself. And he wonders what the potential of this mycelium is. What could it do given the right environment, the right care, the right situation? And very much in the vein of Frankenstein, Gregor has the mad idea to implant this mycelium into a human body. But he can't use a living body. That would be awful, that would be ridiculous, that would be impossible. Even ethics aside, it simply wouldn't work. But a freshly dead body? Maybe. Maybe the mycelium could control it. With a human body to use as a kind of vessel, this mycelium could come to life in a humanoid kind of way. But where could Gregor find a fresh human body? And if he's going to pull this off, he's going to need his partner Simon's help. Simon is a taxidermist. Gregor knows flora, but Simon knows his way around fauna. But will Simon agree to help? From here, the novel walks a very gothic and horror-inspired path. And what I love so much about this, about a lot of modern gothic that has come out recently, is that it fully understands and embraces what the gothic is. Our protagonists, Gregor and Simon, are not likable people. Gregor and Simon are arrogant, judgmental, curmudgeonly men. And now they are two arrogant, judgmental and curmudgeonly men with a lot of intelligence between them and a fungal mass of tendrils with which they might build a monster. The connection between A Botanical Daughter and Frankenstein is inescapable. But it's also very similar to other works, like for example Alistair Gray's Poor Things, or the Guillermo del Toro film The Shape of Water. It has elements of all of those things. But this book doesn't just remind me of Poor Things because it's a Frankenstein-inspired gothic novel. It also reminds me of Poor Things because it's funny as hell. It gets less funny as it goes into its third act and all of the tension and horror and drama really amps up. But in its first 2/3, A Botanical Daughter is a frequently hilarious novel, especially when it comes to the relationship between Gregor and Simon. As I said, these are not likable people. In true gothic tradition, like Frankenstein, like Wuthering Heights, there aren't really lovable people in this book, except maybe Jennifer. She is a real tragic hero in this book. But Gregor and Simon are pompous and arrogant men, and their relationship might be romantic, but they so frequently dislike and say awful things to and about each other, and it's hilarious. I'm actually going to read you a short section from the very middle of the book. Out of context, this will not spoil anything, but this paragraph really had me chuckling. This is a conversation between Jennifer and Gregor after Jenny has been working at the botanical garden for a little while, and she says to Gregor, "You and Simon love each other like that, don't you?" Simon is an insufferable creature, stiff and uncaring one minute, fretful and snide the next. And I suppose I'm no cherub to be around. But yes, we love each other dearly. That moment is fantastic, and it kind of encapsulates the humour of this story and the relationship between Gregor and Simon. Two men who are in love, who are both geniuses of their fields, and are wholly unlikable. A Botanical Daughter is one of those rare novels that is having fun with all of its elements, having fun with all of its inspiration, is enjoying the grotesque body horror of itself. It loves its own characters, it loves those relationships, and it wants you to love them as well, in spite of how awful they can be. But it's also a book of very valuable themes. And the title gives away the most important one. This is a Victorian novel about two gay men living an illegal love affair together in an unconventional home, where half the time they don't even like each other. And what they are building together, whether they like it or not, whether they're comfortable with it or not, is a daughter, a child of their own. This is about two gay men who cannot live happily and openly and at peace in society together, finding a twisted and dark way to live in a very gothic setting. They are two men in love who deserve to start a family, and this is the family they start. They build a monster out of fungus and dead things. It's a wonderfully queer tale that is very much in touch with its politics, the politics of this time period. What was acceptable, what was not, the ways in which people whisper, the ways in which people react to things that they don't like, don't approve of, don't understand. The violence at the heart of ignorant and privileged people. There's a lot of sadness and darkness in here. Gothic fiction is inherently queer. A lot of people don't seem to understand the terms separate the art from the artist. It is an academic concept where you set aside what you know about the artist and their intentions, and you read into their work what you read into it. Which is why Mary Shelley probably wasn't thinking about queer people when she wrote Frankenstein, but Frankenstein is an inescapably queer novel to so many people, myself included. We see ourselves in the monster, we see ourselves in the politics and the relationships. Noah Medlock with A Botanical Daughter is bringing that to the surface, is making it palpably, aggressively, flamboyantly queer. And I love that. Rather than reading into it what you see as a reader, he projects what he feels as a writer. The queerness is on display, the themes are tied to queerness, especially the queerness of this time period. And it is all electric. If you love queer fiction, if you love gothic fiction, and if you love really weird and twisted horror, you are going to fall as deeply in love with A Botanical Daughter as I did. As I said, this book is my new obsession. It has given me everything that I love in a novel, and that is so rare, making science wrong, isolating us in an unusual and often uncomfortable space. A book full of death and dead things. A book of queerness that is full of unlikable characters that I love spending time with. I honestly couldn't ask for more. If someone asked me to describe my perfect novel, I would describe A Botanical Daughter. I'm so glad I have this book in my life. Now it's time for my Patreon book recommendation of the week. This recommendation comes from June Mill, who has recommended We Measure the Earth with Our Bodies by Tse-ring Yangsom Lama. June says, this book profoundly impacted me, addressing the underrepresented oppression of Tibet. This multi-generational narrative spans from just before the Chinese invasion of Tibet to the modern day, focusing on 3 generations affected by the conflict and displaced into refugee camps. At the center of the novel is a nameless clay saint figure, rescued from a destroyed monastery. Unlike most figures, this one is humble, unembellished, human and vulnerable in appearance. This saint is believed to vanish and reappear in crises. While some readers didn't like this novel's disconnected writing style, to me it mirrors the exiled Tibetans' sense of detachment from their homeland, enhancing the story's impact. What a fantastic recommendation. A book I have not read, and so beautifully written about. That was gorgeous writing. Thank you. Be prepared for me to mention A Botanical Daughter at every single opportunity. Support me on Patreon if you'd like to give your recommendations as well, and subscribe for books.